From EPAWA Weather Consulting, headquartered in Worth Whitehall, Pennsylvania, this is Weather Weeklies, an informative video of the ins and outs of weather that affect you most in the EPAWA coverage area. The thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are those of the forecaster alone and may not reflect those of the staff of EPAWA Weather Consulting LLC as a whole, nor its constituents. Now, without further ado, here is meteorologist Bobby Martrich with Weather Weeklies.
Good Sunday morning to another edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, February 27th. We're getting close to the end of the year, but we're not quite, or the end of the season anyway. We're not quite there yet, though, and it's going to appear at times over the next 10 days or so that we're going to have spring coming again, just like we had a few times during February, and then we had a couple days later, we had a back to reality moment. So I think we're going to have a lot of that here in the next 10 days, and then now we're going to talk about the long range and beyond that. Here's our long range outlook from Friday, and it has fundamentally not really changed too much. You'll notice that we have a couple mild periods in here that are noted. Especially between the 5th and the 7th. I think we're going to have some temperatures getting up into the, some areas getting into the 60s during that stretch, or at least one of those days. So we're going to have another one of these mild periods coming in, but we're really up and down before that, just doing one of these numbers here. And that's going to be going on for about the next week until we get to that period. Then there is a slight change here that we have in this, this period right here. Now, this was done Friday, okay, this long-range outlook. I do think that your time to turn slightly below average, which is this period here that we have between the 15th and 21st, is actually going to start on the 12th. And this period before here, up until the 12th, you're going to have slightly milder than average temperatures leading up to that before that trough settles in. So we do have a slightly below average period from about the 13th onward, okay? And I'll show you why that is here in this video. And then there's still some opportunity for at least in early April for some slightly below average temperatures. But again, this is relative to the time of year. In April, the temperatures are continuing to go up like this as far as what normal highs and lows are. So it's going to be a lot more difficult, not impossible, but a lot more difficult to get snow events at that point. I think our best chance for something wintry that is going to be anything of significance anyway that's possible would be in the middle third of the month. So we're talking about maybe like the 13th, 12th, 13th onward through about maybe the equinox or just after, okay? I think that's your best shot of any remaining snowfall. Doesn't mean I'm calling for snowfall, but there is an opportunity there, and we have a winter storm signal outlined in that period for that reason. There may be another one or two in that particular week that we have to keep an eye on too, but I think that's generally that period we're looking at, and I do think when we get into March anyway, we are near to slightly below average temperatures for the entire month as a whole. We're going to keep near average snowfall projections for now because there's some uncertainty exactly how that works out. Because in March, you have to have things a little bit better timed and tracked in order to get snow, especially on a significant level. So not impossible, certainly. We have had plenty of years in the past where the snow occurred in March, okay? We just don't know at this range. There are opportunity windows for that, though, okay? Here's what average snowfall is in the month of March. We're moving out of February. We're going to finish below average snowfall across the entire region for the month of February, and below average year-to-date for most areas except for down here in southeastern coastal areas, which have had a double than average in some places of what normal winter is down there. Here's what average snowfall is in March, and you see it goes down significantly. It's not a ton of snow, but March is kind of like either you get it or you don't, okay? There's a lot of years that you have nothing at all, like last year, and our leading analog year that has a lot of snow, like 2018. Now, 2018 is interesting because we're still, since I mentioned this first in November as being a leading analog for this year, has held very well, okay? Has held very well. Now, we're going to continue to monitor this, of course, but, I mean, this is there is potential, at least, that this could follow something like that. Not to that extent, necessarily, but we could follow that same kind of pattern here where we have that colder shot coming in here during the month of March. Here is the interesting thing, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. Now, in last week's video, I was talking about how this was driving the pattern, and it had a movement of the MJO had it at phase 4, where it is kind of going into circle of death right now, and it had it going through phase 4, phase 5, phase 6, kind of like this, okay? You can see it is no longer doing that. It is now collapsed into the circle of death, and it should remain there up through the end of this period according to GFS Ensemble. So GFS Ensemble was very wrong in projecting this maritime continent propagation of the Kelvin wave associated with the MJO, okay? And most others have, the European model and the Australian models have continued to keep this in the circle of death for this period. So this is not something that's surprising. GFS Ensemble is on its own, showing this propagation in here, and it has backed off since. So it has caved to the other guidance. Usually when we're dealing with the MJO, though, it's not something that GFS is not the most favored solution of those three. It doesn't mean it can't be wrong, it can't be right, but in this case, it has caved to the other guidance, and we are most likely going to collapse in the circle of death. What does that mean? Well, it just means that the tropical forcing part of things, the convection, a measure of the convection along the equatorial regions, the tropical convergence zone just north, 5 degrees north of the equator, globally, is not having a profound effect on the pattern. Okay, so that's all that means. Okay, so you're not looking at, if it was going through phase 4 and 5 and 6, those are warm phases, and that can certainly affect the pattern intraseasonally. Okay, and that's why they've backed off that period. And the reason it's doing that, as I discussed in last week's video, this is the Eastern Pacific Oscillation that is going to be driving our pattern once we get past March 12th, and for about at least 10 days after that. So that 10-day period is your window of winter, so to speak. And you can see when the EPO goes forward, when we get to, now there's a little bit of a lag here, the EPO goes forward, we're going to go down, we're going to start to decline that EPO and turn it into a negative, and actually a very strongly negative EPO, and it doesn't climb out of it for about 10 days. This entire period from here to here is about 10 days in length, okay? So there is a lag for us to feel the effects of this. It starts in the the northern U.S. and then western U.S. and kind of works its way eastward. So even though this negative turn, which is right here, starts around the 3rd, and it's showing ending around the 13th, that is not necessarily true for our sensible weather effects. We will get an effect of that a little bit after that. So we're going to have it starting the 10 days after that. It's usually 7 to 10 day lag to feel these effects, and that's exactly what we're going to be dealing with, it looks like, between about the 12th, 13th, and maybe the equinox or just after, 20th, 21st, 22nd, something like that, okay? Where we'll have predominantly slightly below average temperatures. Here's what the EPO looks like. This is a loop. This starts off with our warm temperatures here, and it doesn't quite hit us right away, but look at this ridging building into Alaska right here. You see that? This is what's driving it. You know, it's not quite getting far enough here. I actually stopped the image. Let me see if I can continue. This thing's frustrating. I'm going to continue beyond that. Watch this build into Alaska. This drives a negative EPO on a cross-polar flow, and you can see it starts in the northern U.S. and western U.S. first, and watch it just swing eastward. Okay, it takes some time, but it does get here around the 12th. Okay, and you have those colder temperatures hanging around as a predominant thing for our weather starting around the 12th or 13th of the month, okay? So you'll have another shot of winter before it wants to let go, basically, okay? Here's what the EPO looks like in terms of a cross-polar flow. Here's that ridge in Alaska, and in this case, you have a cross-polar flow developing that drives cold into the U.S. Again, it comes to the north central and western U.S. first, and then it slides eastward, and that's exactly what it's doing on the ensemble guidance. So it's finally picking up on the fact that, yes, there will be a negative APO, and yes, this will be controlling our pattern because the Madden-Julian oscillation is in the circle of death, so we will not have any influence from that, so this is going to be running the show. The EPO is running the show. Here's our temperature periods. And looking up until that point, you have a lot of ups and downs here. So you have some colder shots, very transient, and then you'll have a warmer shot, then you'll have a colder shot, then a warmer shot. This period between the 5th and 7th, though, is going to be a very warm period. And I wouldn't be surprised if most of the area is in the upper 50s and 60s at this point during that time frame. Then we have another break behind that. I don't want to move this forward. Let it run again. But this is a lot of ups and downs, cold, warm, right? Here's that surge between the 5th and 7th. And then after that goes through, here's the EPO stuff developing in the western and northern U.S. But we just go to near average for a couple days, and then you get a little, right ahead of that trough, you get a little bit of a slightly above average push around the 12th, okay, while that's building in the western United States. But then watch what happens after this point. It finally starts to pull into our area, and it settles in once we get past the 12th, okay? Now, it's uncertain what the extent of this cold is going to be. Are we going to get these really cold anomalies coming into this region? A little uncertain to tell yet, but we're going to be at least slightly below average during that period. And if you're slightly below average in March, you have an opportunity at least where something perfectly timed. It's still probably going to have to come in at night, not during the day. You might have some slop storms involved with that, where you have some snow and rain in the same system, or a mix, like we just had this with this last event, was mostly a wintry mix there. It's tougher. Okay, it's not. I'm not going to BS you. It is. It's tougher, but there's plenty of examples where if this is perfectly timed and tracked just right, it really won't matter. And the only thing is with March storms, the sun angle's higher. Even if you do get dumped on in any location, it's gone in a couple days, okay? Because the sun angle, even if the temperatures are close to freezing, it's going to melt pretty quick, okay? Now, here's those temperature periods graphically shown. And this is using Lehigh Valley International Airport because it's our centermost portion of our coverage area, okay? See, there's all this ups and downs stuff we got going on here. We got a lot of ups and downs, and here's that big temperature spike right here that we're expecting between the 5th and 7th. That's right there. Then we kind of go down to near average, maybe slightly above for a little bit, and here's where it tails off right here. There's where the EPO starts kicking in, and that's not down to this range here, 13th, 14th, 15th of March. So you're trying to finally drop those temperatures. Still going to be above average during the day, though, or excuse me, above freezing during the day, even if it's colder than average. But again, if you have something coming in at night or perfectly tracked in time synoptically, they can draw into more cold air into the system. You get some overrunning events, and you're on the north side of that boundary, in between the southeast ridge and this cold air pushing in. You can certainly get some snow. Okay, so winter is not over yet. All right, we're not done yet. It's going to appear over the next 10 days or so, like you're going to have times that like, oh wow, here's spring again. It's back. Well, spring doesn't end until. Or excuse me, winter doesn't end until March 20th. So we got some time yet, all right? Now I want to pull up 2018 here because this is an interesting thing. Now I was using, in previous videos, I was using this same Allentown Lehigh Valley International Airport location for reference to February and how that worked out. Well, February didn't produce much snow, okay? February produced very similar snow as it did in 2018, miraculously. Same thing in January, same thing, okay? Here is what March did in 2018. I highlighted 3 periods here, 3 specific periods that produced snow in the month of March, okay? This first one here had 0.77 inches of rain equivalent, but only 3.7 inches of snow. So what does that mean? That means it's a slop storm. It started off as rain, then it ended as snow, and you got 3.7 inches. How do I know that? There's a 4-inch snow depth in the very next day on the ground. And I did go back to that system specifically, and it was in fact a rain to snow event. Same thing here, a little bit less liquid equivalent of this one, 0.57, but you end up with 3.4 inches of snow and 3 inches of snow on the ground the very next day, okay? So those are those 2 first systems, kind of slop systems, and you can have that, all right? Your chances of having an all-snow event are lowered. Doesn't mean it's impossible, though, because when you get down to this one right here, this was a mostly snow event, came in at night, had a lot of moisture with it, and this was a big storm. You had 0.95 inches of precipitation and 13.2 inches of snow at this particular location. Right around the equinox. Actually, it was on the equinox, the 21st. Okay. Now this year the equinox is on the 20th, but regardless, it's you still have opportunities for some snow events, even if they're just slop events. It still counts. This number still counts, even though it was rain as part of each of these systems. These numbers still count to the yearly total. Might not be exactly how you want to draw it up, as far as snow days are concerned and things like that, and playing in the snow. When you have a lot of slop on the ground, but that's what we're looking at. So that's the possibilities that we have going forward into March. And then in this location, you had 20.7 inches of snow in March, basically over those 3 storms. There's a couple trace amounts mixed in there as well, but there's basically those 3 events. Okay, 2 slop events, and then one that was mostly snow or all snow. And you had a 13-inch snowfall in March, which was pretty significant for the equinox, okay? Now, here is across the region. We're going to compare year-to-date snowfall. This is snowfall that's fallen thus far this year in this left column. Philadelphia, 12.5. Allentown, 14.8. Harrisburg, 12.6. Scranton, 15.4. Newark, 17.1. And the big winner, Atlantic City, 33.3, which is about double of what you normally see in a season. So great winter down there. Look at March 2018, though, and the snowfall amounts in the right-hand column that fell that month. So if things are lined up correctly and you get a perfectly timed tracked system, these are the kind of things you can get. You can still snow in March, and if you have the below average temperatures in place, which we expect to be from about the 12th to 21st, 22nd, something like that, you're going to have the opportunity, at least if something comes in there, to give you some snow. Is there a guarantee something's going to be in there? No, there's not. But there is the opportunity. At least you're giving yourself a fighting chance for one last gasp or a couple last gasps there in there with snowfall. So Philadelphia in March 2018 had 15.2 inches that month, 20.7 in Allentown, 16 inches in Harrisburg, 19.9, about 20 inches in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, 13.2 in Newark, and 9.6 in Atlantic City. So it can still happen. All right, you just need to be. We need to see this on a shorter term basis and see what we're dealing with that week. Could it be cold and dry? Yeah, negative EPO can do that too. Okay, but I think what we're going to be dealing with a lot is some overrunning events during that particular week, where you have the southeast ridge kind of pressing against that cold air, and you have a track maybe along or either over or just south of our region, which gives us some slop events. If it's south of us, you can get a mostly snow event, and that's exactly what happened on March 20th and 28th, or 21st in 2018. Okay, so it's possible. You just need to get the right system in the right place to do that. Now, the unfortunate thing, and I'll say it's unfortunate, and you could have a different opinion. The unfortunate thing is that once we get past this period, we do start turning milder for a short time, but then we get into early April, and the indications are from both Euro Weeklies and the GFS Extended is that we're going to return to slightly below average temperatures to at least begin the month of April, the first 7 to 10 days. Okay, so spring's not going to be eager, it looks like, to just jump in here and flip everything over. And we still have slightly below average temperatures in that beginning of that month. Now, slightly below average is relative. Early April, your highs are typically in the 50s at that point, or pretty close to it. So it's tougher. Slightly below average usually doesn't cut it unless you get something perfectly, absolutely perfectly thread the needle, time to track. It is possible. And as a matter of fact, in 2018, a few areas did have some snow early in the month of April. But so we're not eliminating these chances yet. And we do have that colder period coming in after. So you're going to have this period between like the 13th and 22nd, right? And that's going to be slightly below average, if not below. Okay. Then after that point, I think we moderate week 4 of March, as we have outlined in the long-range outlook. And this particular model also suggests, or about near average, right? During that period. And then going into April, very late in the month in March, and then the first 7 to 10 days of April, you are slightly below average also. Okay, just, again, climatological averages are going up, though, at that point pretty significantly. So it might not produce snow, it may, but you still have a cold start to spring is the bottom line here. So we're going to continue to monitor that next couple weeks, but I'm really thinking that, and the April thing's a little sketchy, okay? We'll see. That's getting pretty far out there. But the bottom line is the EPO is going to be driving the pattern here over the next couple of weeks, it looks like, once it starts settling in. And that's not going to be until once we get into the end of the first week of March. And then it'll start in the western U.S. first and kind of work its way eastward by the time we get to about the 12th or so. That's what happens. And there's that look of what it does. Here's that. Starts at the 12th, and then here comes the cold, okay? And this all starts shifting toward us. And the cold air just unleashes in that cross-polar flow manner to give us those cold temperatures. Get the cold in there first, you can still have snow events, okay? Not saying it's definitely going to happen, but there's at least the opportunity, okay? That's what we're looking at. So we're maintaining the 2018 as a leading analog. This is going to be the winner this year, absolutely. As far as temperature patterns and things like that. I mean, we're the 500 millibar pattern, the sea surface temperature anomalies, everything matches up, and this has really been driving things this year to be very similar to 2018 in a lot of ways. Not exactly in snowfall, but it never will be, because it's going to depend on individual storms and where they hit, where they track, that kind of thing. We're monitoring the MJO progression in the weeks ahead, which determines how long the colder overall pattern maintains, not only in March, but also into early April. A little bit far for April yet, but there are indications that spring is not going to be in a hurry to start early this year. Up and down temperature pattern through about March 12th. You're going to have several mild spikes in there, especially between the 5th and 7th. I think that's a really notable one, with temperatures that are going to get into the 60s in some areas again. Give you a false sense of security, thinking, oh, well, here's spring again. Well, it's not going to last, okay? The EPO drives a colder pattern after the 12th of the month, with colder than average temperatures settling in. And again, I think it's about 7 to 10 days that lasts, and then after that point, we start to moderate, at least to near average for week 4, and then we might be back into slightly below average temperatures again by the time we get to the beginning of April. So we're going to watch out for that. Look for that in future videos. We're not stopping the Weather Weeklies videos because we still have opportunities here. And if we have any storm signals that are more concrete, instead of just me using teleconnections that aren't on the ensembles yet, to try to come up with a date or a window of time. Once we get into better signals become shown on some models, we'll show you that. But I still like that transition period at the beginning of the EPO switch, and then maybe an additional signal at closer to the equinox as we're starting to come out of it. So we'll see how that works. We've got a lot of time to look at this. Today's only February 27th. Month's coming to an end already, which is crazy. Already moving into March, but soon enough, if you're looking for the warmer temperatures to be more consistent, I do think we're going to get into that probably the second half of April, though, and then we'll start to turn around at that point. I'm EPAWA meteorologist Bobby Marchus. That is this edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, February 27th. Join us again next week, and we'll hopefully have some signals that we can identify at that point and get a little bit more concrete on the pattern going forward into April at that time. Take care.